Hey guys, this video covers some really heavy topics, so viewer discretion is advised. Please be kind to yourself and take a break if you need to. The video will still be here when you get back. Also, this video contains spoilers for the following games, some of which are really big deals. I'll label each section so you can skip over them as needed, but I seriously recommend playing them first, they're all very good. Finally, I'd like to apologise to any French speakers for my pronunciation in this video. Your language is lovely and I am trying, but I am also very bad at this. Thank you for understanding. There are, I think, very few truly universal human experiences. No matter how common you think something must be, you will almost always find exceptions to the rule. But amongst those few universal experiences, death, and to a broader degree loss, seem to be chief amongst them. It does not matter who you are, how rich, how powerful, how influential or successful, you will die someday. Someone you know will die, and whether it involves death or not, you will lose someone or something you deeply care about. And because of this, I think grief follows behind death and loss as something almost as universal as they are. And death is, of course, an uncomfortable subject. It's scary to think about. The idea that you or someone else could simply stop is a frightening prospect. And I think this is why death as a subject has captured the minds of storytellers for as long as we've been capable of telling each other stories. Tales of meeting death, of outwitting, befriending, outplaying, or simply defying it are some of the oldest tales around, from the legend of Orpheus and Eurydice to Ishtar and Tammuz. Telling stories is simply human nature and often how we've made sense of the world ever since we first learned to communicate. Oral tradition gave way to the printed word, which transitioned to the stage and the silver screen, until finally, we are brought to video games. Of course, death is absolutely nothing new to the world of gaming. I think it might even be the most common fail state. But rarer are the games that explore death as a concept, and rarer still are games that explore grief and loss, especially as main themes. It's far more common for games to explore these themes on a smaller scale, oftentimes briefly and with a single impactful death, so as to not overwhelm the player and take away from the overall experience, but just as often to raise the stakes of the story and demonstrate that things have gotten serious, such as with the death of Aerith in Final Fantasy VII, the boss in Metal Gear Solid 3, or Mordin Solus from Mass Effect 3. Or you have things like fucking Lavender Town in Pokemon Red and Blue. Looking back, I can absolutely understand how Lavender Town Syndrome and Pokemon Black became such popular creepypastas. It wasn't just that the music was creepy and loud and just a little too much for the Game Boy speakers to properly handle, so it both gave you a headache and sounded like your handheld was killing itself. It was also a neck-snappingly hard lurch and tone that took you from a fun adventure where fainting is the worst thing that can happen to a Pokemon to Pokemon die and it's sad and all these people are grieving the loss of their beloved partners, and also this Marowak was murdered by Team Rocket and is haunting the tower because her baby was taken from her. The Game Boy could have bit you and it would have been less of a shock. Like I said, I can completely understand why so many ghost stories popped up around this part of the game. It was a lot of kids' first confrontation with the idea of death as an end to things, and lacking the experience or emotional maturity to truly understand and process it, a measure of control and comfort could be found in making it a story, in assigning a controlled narrative and therefore an understandable meaning to it. On average, humans really don't like thinking about death, but there are ways to make it so that the discomfort is something that we have more control and say over. Of course, Lavender Town was a long time ago, and gaming has come very far in the decades since. Games specifically exploring death and loss and grief and trauma and sorrow have been made and the medium has matured with them. But I don't think any game has explored these themes, especially the theme of grief, in as amazing and straightforward and powerful a way as this year's most notable release, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33. And today I'd like to talk about how this and other games explore grief and loss, what they have to say about it and what we can learn from them. Because to be human is to know both grief and love, loss and gain, and of course, dark and light. And the stories we tell about them are so important. Before I get into the game itself, I think it's important to define grief so we're all on the same page. It's common, I think, to think of grief as a big sadness, usually in association with the death of a loved one, but I've found that grief is a little bit more than that. Grief is, I believe, the deep sorrow and pain felt from the loss of something with great emotional significance. As I said, people tend to think of grief in terms of death, and that is certainly the most powerful and common form it takes. But grief is found in more than just the presence of death, but also in the unliving. People grieve the loss of a friendship or the end of a romantic relationship, even the destruction of a sentimental object. We don't tend to think of it as grieving, but the pain of losing something we've grown so attached to is a form of grief. When a child's very first and oldest stuffed animal tears and has to be thrown away, they might not know it yet, but that is their first introduction to grief, to the pain of loss. It's not equal to the loss of a loved one, but it is still a form of mourning. When you cry because your partner breaks up with you, you're not simply sad, you're mourning the loss of your relationship. Anyway, with that covered, let's finally get into the game. Sorry it took so long to get here, but I wanted to be thorough. In the briefest of summaries, Clair Obscur is the story of the people of Lumiere, a city that was torn from the continent and cast out to sea when a cataclysmic event known as the Fracture shattered the world. Soon after the Fracture, a titanic monolith and a giant woman known as the Paintress appeared, and each year on the same day she would awaken and paint a new, progressively lower number upon it. A number the people were horrified to learn indicated the maximum age anyone could be, as anyone whose age matched it would immediately be erased from existence in an event that would come to be known as the Gamage. I think the beginnings of the game are actually quite beautiful in how impeccably it sets up the stakes of the story, starting just before the latest Gamage from the perspective of Gustave, member of the soon to set out Expedition 33 and one of our protagonists. Though there does not exist a Gamage without significance, this one is special to him, because it's the day he loses Sophie, his ex-girlfriend who he still loves, and who still loves him in return. This part of the game is rife with a somber beauty as Sophie joins you in your walk to the harbour to witness the Gamage, and you bear witness to just how horribly the entire thing affects not just these two, but the entire city. Gustave and Sophie and everyone they meet comment on the events surrounding them, on the flowers that have gone unsold because there are so few people to buy them, on the families struggling with the coming goodbye, even on how the presence of the Paintress has changed how people feel about art, and all the while there's this sense of words not just unspoken, but forcibly held back. Because neither is willing to say exactly what is coming. Nobody wants to be the first to say the word die. And I'd like to just play the scene of the Gamage for you, because it is very effective and I honestly do not think that I can do it justice with words alone.
I'm here.
Even having come to just barely get to know Sophie, you can still feel the horrible, overwhelming pain of her erasure. The intimacy, the sorrow, the vulnerability, it's fucking awful. Then you think back to that shot of the flood of petals and smoke overtaking the skyline of the city, and you have to ask, how many people are going through this exact moment? How many cruelly soft farewells have been said on these docks over the years as the paintress hides her head once again, waiting for another year to pass before she creates another horrifically beautiful pyre of lumiere? This is what the expeditioners fight for. This is why they say, when one falls, we continue. Why they stress that this is all for those who come after, and why tomorrow comes is just as much a sigh of resignation as it is a roar of defiance. Because someone has to stop this, and the expeditioners, most of whom only have 1 year left before their own gamage, have to believe they can give their loved ones the mere chance of another tomorrow. This is what they fight for. This is what most will die for as well, upon reaching the beaches of the continent and receiving a short but brutal introduction to the dangers of the mainland. Dangers Gustave barely manages to survive and would not have allowed himself to live through after, if not for Lune's intervention.
You do that, we both die. Hey.
Sophie's death is only the first of many we witness over the course of the game, but its impact will continue to be felt by the player, because Gustave will continue to feel it. Each member of Expedition 33 struggles with not just their grief as citizens of Lumiere, but as individuals with their own losses and traumas, all of which weave together to make up the grand tapestry of Clair Obscur's story. A story about grief, about love, loss, purpose, about hope, and above all, about what comes next.
If you're gonna give someone flowers, you should probably do it before they wither and die.
What, the flower? Or Sophie?
Ooh, dark. Sophie would approve.
I think Gustave is the perfect character for the role of POV protagonist of Act 1, because he starts the game in a similar mindset to the player, confused, emotionally raw, and in dire need of an outlet. Gustave is largely defined by two traits in the game, his anger and his love for those around him, and they are, in fact, intertwined. Each of the expedition members processes their grief in different ways, and Gustave's is through anger. This is why he's made a habit of throwing rocks at the paintress, and why he cannot see her and the things associated with her as anything but monsters. Because he's angry. And rightfully so. I'm not implying that his attitude is in any way wrong, but I do think that it does the important job of demonstrating how devastating and all-encompassing the grief of Lumiere's citizens is. In part, I think, because they're never given the time to process it. As noted by many other video essayists, one of the most prominent themes in Clair Obscur is the corrosive nature of grief, how leaving it to fester will eat you from the inside out and tear you apart, sometimes even transforming you into something horrible. And the thing is, while you can overcome your grief, and oftentimes the aid of other people is truly helpful in doing so, the most vital component to process and overcome grief is time. And that is something that no citizen of Lumiere is ever given. Time is one of the most important components for healing from grief, because the weight of the loss isn't something that can be compensated for, even with other people there to help. Losing someone leaves a hole in your life where they once stood, and nobody else is capable of filling that gaping wound, no matter how kind they might be or how important they are to you. Their presence can help the healing process, but it's still a hollow emptiness that requires time to close on its own, time to process the pain, to gain distance from it, and allow yourself to stop thinking about the loss until you can go on again, until the void finally shrinks to a much more manageable size. It will never fully close and the pain will never truly fade, but at some point you'll be able to smile again and mean it, to laugh with your whole being again, to cry about something else. Time may not heal all wounds, but it does allow you to heal yourself. But nobody in Lumiere is given that time. It isn't just the yearly gamage, it's the fact that the paintress is always there, her towering form always visible on the horizon, ever a reminder not just of what's been lost, but of everyone you'll lose next time too. The paintress is an all-consuming presence, forever reminding people of their grief and keeping that wound fresh, and so nobody is ever allowed to process their grief. And this is something we see so very clearly in Gustave, who leaves on the expedition immediately after Sophie's death, manifesting in anger and aggression. It's in how he shouts at Lune about proper protocol, in how Lune has to keep holding him back from attacking non-aggressive Nevrons because they could learn something, in how he attacks Go-Blue when it flees. His pain and anger need to come out somehow, and so he directs it at the Paintress and those things associated with her. But Gustave is also filled with love for his companions. His relationships with Maele and Lune and Sciel are genuinely sweet and loving and supportive, and it's thanks to them that he remains sane at all. Lune is the only reason he doesn't kill himself after the slaughter on the beach, and she's the main reason he begins to look at the world with curiosity instead of mere suspicion. His relief and joy at seeing Sciel alive and well is heartwarming, and his love and care for Maele are present in every scene they share. The comfort and stability they both find in their shared bond is very clear to see. Maele is always his priority, no matter the circumstances or the danger he could face. The presence of the other expeditioners is what gives him the strength to continue, not just to face the dangers of the continent, but also a world without the woman he loved. Just like any of us, Gustave begins to heal through the presence of others who care about him, and through talking about and remembering Sophie with them. This is how his grief is processed, not through anger and violence, but vulnerability and connection. Aside from time and the comfort of others, one of the most important factors in overcoming grief is emotional intelligence, your ability to understand, direct, and manage your emotions. But what happens if you never taught how? Or if the tools you're given are self-destructive and actively work against your own healing process? Well, then your negative emotions become a poison, rotting you from the inside out and seeping into every other aspect of your life. South of Midnight is a game largely about understanding and confronting the pain and trauma people have suffered and easing the grief they feel. You play Hazel, a young woman who, in the process of trying to find her mother who was washed away in a flood, discovers she's what's known as a weaver, someone who can access the threads of the Grand Tapestry, the name for the way the whole of life and reality is connected. In the world of South of Midnight, great pain and suffering create tears within the Grand Tapestry that becomes filled with stigma, a literal infection upon the fabric of reality, made from the trauma of those who live within it. And as a weaver, Hazel is capable of both seeing and resolving the stigma, able to attempt to heal the denizens of the world through an understanding of their past and their pain. And while there's another character I will come back to later, right now I'd like to focus on Laurent and the sad tale of a man consumed and transformed by his rage. Laurent's parents were poor lumber workers, cruelly taken advantage of by their boss and horribly overworked, as was the case of every other worker under the factory's management. Poor Laurent's mother caught a deadly illness, one that would have been treatable if they'd had the money, but the company paid them in script instead, and no matter how hard his father worked and fought and struggled to gather the funds for treatment, it was never going to be enough and she died, leaving Laurent in his father's care. And Laurent's father is where the troubles stem from. Daddy was an old-fashioned man. He believed that to be a man, he had to do things on his own, never show weakness and never ask for help. And these are ideas that he beat into his son. Seal your pain inside, never show weakness. Boys don't cry.
That man was the devil. He whipped me, he hurt me, all to make me a man. He laid the first brick, not me. Told me to square up my shoulders. Boys don't cry. Brick by tear-stained brick, I seal my pain inside, inside.
Boys Don't Cry is an insidious sentiment because it teaches men that their masculinity is dependent on strength, and the strong do not feel sad or frightened. It trains men to bottle their emotions and that rage is the only acceptable display. But this simply does not work. People need to feel their emotions to properly deal with them, and trying to control them by just never feeling them at all only serves to harm you in the long run. If you do not learn a healthy way to regulate your emotions, they will make themselves known elsewhere. One way or another, your feelings will come out, and if they come out unbidden, it will be in a form you do not control, and you will very quickly come to regret it. Nobody, especially not a child, is built to keep their sorrow inside, and when Laurent's father was shot and killed by the company boss, that pain and rage and grief that he'd kept inside for so long exploded outward, twisting and transforming him into an uncontrollable raging beast. But killing the boss could not end his pain, and because he never learned how to cope with his own grief, it would continue to fester, a monster waiting to strike whenever he grew angry, completely out of his control. And because of this, he could never have a healthy or happy relationship again, because the fear of losing control was a poison all its own. Even when he was dating Hazel's mother and felt genuinely loved and happy for the first time in decades, the fear of losing control ultimately drove him to break her heart. If Laurent had been taught how to handle his feelings, if he had been allowed to display his pain in ways other than anger, he might have had a chance at a normal, happy life. His grief didn't have to be a poison inside him forever. It shouldn't have turned him into a monster. But as we see in Clair Obscur, grief left unchecked and unprocessed can turn anyone into a monster.
I break my bones, I rend my skin, bricks turn to dust, and rage floods in. It sears my soul, sets my veins aflame. Never hold, just myself to blame.
Fuck the mission. Really?
Lune is an interesting addition to the cast, because at first glance, she seems to be the odd one out. She comes across as detached from everything happening, more interested in gathering data than in actually fighting the Paintress, and barely seems to be counted amongst the grievers in Lumiere. Even Sciel's cheerful nihilism gives way to reveal the deeply troubling sorrow she feels sooner than Lune does. In fact, outside of her unbridled curiosity towards the Gestrals and the nature of the continent, which is really endearing for being honest, the earliest Lune shows any large display of emotion is when arguing with Gustave about the proper way to continue.
Things change in the field.
There's a reason.
Protocol doesn't cover every contingency. You know that.
There's a reason it's protocol. We designed it to yield the optimal result in the vast majority of situations.
Was our entire team dying part of that optimal result?
She almost comes across as if she doesn't feel anything sometimes, but she does. Lune feels everything. The way she expresses her emotions is very subdued and can definitely make her come across as insensitive and far too blunt. But she does feel them and she does care. It's just that this is how she handles her feelings. Side note, I've always read Lune as somewhat autistic, which is definitely a subject for another video, but does anyone else feel the same? Sorry, getting off topic. Lune's parents were scientists that were, much like everyone else in Lumiere, obsessed with the Paintress. They made it their life's work to find a way to stop her and seemingly had children for the express purpose of having lab assistants that didn't need to go home. But when Lune's elder siblings had no interest in that role, it fell instead to her. And this role defined her entire relationship to her parents, to the point that they barely seemed to play the role of parents to her at all, instilling their obsession into their daughter and making it very clear what was expected of her. I can only imagine how hard it must have been growing up with parents so clinically detached and emotionally separated. Children tend to learn how to act from their parents, and what Lune learned was to focus entirely on gathering information and getting results. This is why she pressures Maele for information when she's freaking out over Renoir and Alicia's time-stop conversation. This is why she's so insistent on talking to the White Neverons instead of fighting them, because she has a duty to solve the problem, and you cannot do that without first gathering information. Hell, this seems to be why she takes lying, whether actively or by omission, as almost a personal affront, because it keeps information from her that could potentially help her solve the problem. Lune is not cold, nor is she uncaring. She actually cares a great deal, but she struggles to show it because of the massive weight her parents placed on her. She says it herself, she feels everything. She just uses it as fuel to keep going, keeping it under tight control and burning in her chest like a flame. And this is incredibly unhealthy, but it's all she knows how to do, because Lune is a master of compartmentalizing. It's how she approaches most things, and it's even what allows her to deal the final blow to Sirène. On the subject of Sirène though, what I find most fascinating about Lune is what she ends up grieving at the end of her storyline. When the expedition finally makes it to Sirène, she attempts to control them by showing them what they most wish to see. And while for most of them, including Lune, this takes the form of their loved ones, what Lune wants isn't just her parents still alive, it's their love. Lune wants, more than anything, to find proof that they loved her at all, that they truly regarded her as their daughter. This is why her personal questline involves finding the journal from their expedition, because she's hoping against all reason that there would be a sign. But after fighting the chromatic Dessandre, absolutely fuck this boss by the way.
Doors of Chroma, open!
This is all it has to say.
Expedition 46, Annalie. Brigitte finally succumbed to her infection. She fought off that blasted Neveron for 4 days and 4 nights, saving the rest of us, but it gashed her badly. Toward the end, she seemed almost peaceful. She said not to worry. Her daughter Lune will finish their work.
Tragically, Lune is forced to contend with the fact that her parents just never loved her the way she wanted them to. She never had the relationship she needed, and all the years spent obsessing over the paintress and their work never earned her love like she'd hoped.
All my life, everything we did was about the paintress. It was a constant hum in the background. This worry, this responsibility, just always there. Always. 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 There was no relief. Never. Even when I sleep, it's still there. Like a breath I can never release.
That's a lot of pressure.
Even her last words were still, finish our work.
It also shows how much faith she had in you.
That's one way to look at it.
And the other way?
My only value to them. Not as a daughter, but as a backup plan. For their legacy.
Lune's specific grief isn't over her parents' death, but over the relationship she never had. It's subdued, but Lune is mourning the emptiness left behind in being forced to acknowledge the lack of parental love in her life. Remember, we do not just mourn for the dead, but the unliving and living as well. And Lune is grieving what she didn't want to believe she never had. She spent her life cutting out her friends and her love of music and many other things that could have made her happy in the hopes that it would somehow earn her parents' love. Even after they died, she still threw herself into her work, desperate to not only find a solution, but to prove to herself that she was worth it. That she was worthy of the love they never actually showed her. Their voices kept her prisoner, even without their presence. However, you're always capable of starting again, of discovering your way out of the labyrinth of expectations and parental programming, and finding yourself buried somewhere within. After confronting the truth and having a conversation with Verso, Lune decides to finally allow herself to indulge in her passion for music. Sometimes we find ourselves in other people, and sometimes they act as our guides through the darkness. Deltarune is a game about many things, although grief and loss generally aren't considered chief amongst them. However, much like Lune, main character Chris is mourning the living themselves. Exploring the town in Chapter 1, it becomes very clear to me that Chris is in the process of grieving the loss of their adoptive family. Asgore and Toriel's divorce may not have ended with either dead, but it destroyed the only source of stability they had in their life. Most of the characters you interact with throughout the game talk about how things used to be for the Dreamer family, how Chris used to have friends they'd play with, how the holidays would spend time with them, how Asriel once kept them company when their parents were fighting, bringing them to the diner and buying them hot chocolate to help comfort them and keep them going through the stressful divorce proceedings. But at the start of the game, Chris is all alone, isolated from the people they used to have in their life, and the hot chocolate that used to be a comfort only causes their throat to tighten as it recalls bittersweet memories of better, less lonely times. But just as with Lune, Chris finds comfort in new friends, happiness in things they never thought they would again. We often find endings painful and harsh, and even memories of the good times can turn bitter as we look back at what we once had. But happiness will come again, both in new and old ways. There's always the chance for a new beginning, it's just sometimes you need a little help.
What? How? You guys? You're alive! I thought I was the only one left.
The sad truth about grief is that sometimes you just don't recover from it. Sometimes the loss is so devastating that it shatters you entirely, and it seems like nothing can truly glue you back together. And this truth lies at the center of our beloved farmer turned teacher. Sciel is honestly a fascinating character, because she seems so full of contradiction. She's bubbly and excitable and seemingly holds a great zest for life, but she's also the character most defined by their pain and loss. Before the expedition, before the death of her love and the loss of her will to live, Sciel was a farmer alongside Sophie and Gustave, and the farm was where she met her husband, Pierre. Falling deeply in love, the two were soon happily married, despite knowing their time together would be short. In fact, Sciel still deeply loves Pierre. Just listen to the way that she talks about him.
That's actually how I met Pierre. I asked his team for honey petal samples. He brought me a bouquet of them, and 15 boxes of plant cuttings.
Smart man. If you want to romance a farmer, live plants are probably better than dead flowers.
Dead flowers are nice too.
You don't talk about your husband much. Sorry.
It's okay. It's just... it still hurts that he's gone. Neither of us were perfect, but we were perfect for each other.
A love so strong that it was worth the shortness of their time together. It's something beautiful. She knew that he would gamage before her, and she decided that she would be okay with that. To have him, to love him, would be worth it. But she never got that time. She should have had 5 more years with him, but Pierre died in an accident on an island offshore and his body washed away into the ocean. The gamage may be a terrible and tragic occurrence, but the one thing you can say for it is that it's gentle and predictable. People are given time to say goodbye and there's security in that. But Sciel was never given that kindness with Pierre, never got to hold his hand one last time or kiss his face or hear his voice and tell him she loved him like she should have. And that loss, it broke her. Perhaps in the hopes that it would provide a form of reunion, Sciel attempted to drown herself.
When I lost Pierre, I tried to swim away from Lumiere. I swam for as long as I could, as far as the waves would carry me, until I could no longer swim.
This is absolutely heartbreaking, but it doesn't end here. And some people may find what I'm about to say particularly hard to listen to, so skip to this point in the video if you'd rather not hear it right now, okay? Okay. There's no easy way to say this, but despite her words, Sciel is still very much suicidal. I think there's an inclination for people to think of being suicidal as resulting in active attempts on one's life only, but it's more complicated than that because people can be passively suicidal too. Of the 2 characters that suffer from suicidal ideation, Sciel demonstrates this version. It's found in things like substance abuse, in acting recklessly in dangerous situations, and sometimes in idolizing death, or treating your own health and safety as if they just are not a concern to you. And these are all things that Sciel displays. She's demonstrated to be an alcoholic in her introduction, her combat animations tend to be wild or flashy in ways that most other characters aren't, and she calls death a friend. She shows a real reckless abandon towards her own life and safety. But I think the most telling detail comes after you defeat the paintress in Lumiere's Gamaged. While other characters are despairing or confused or terrified, Sciel merely looks peaceful. She's even smiling when she's erased. She may not be actively attempting to take her own life, but she still clearly finds it holds little value and considers it a mercy to die, a way to return to her husband. Also, I'd like to take a moment to appreciate the soul-destroying power of how she describes missing him. I've never seen any game describe the emptiness I spoke of earlier so well.
I would have done anything to see him again. To hear his voice. To feel his arms around me. Every day, I just felt the lack of him. The negative space he used to inhabit. The dip in the chair where he sat. The hollow of his shoes. The emptiness inside his jacket.
Charlotte did such a phenomenal job with this, holy shit. This lack of care doesn't extend past herself though, which I find very interesting. Sciel is actually a very kind person, and she still strives to use her last remaining year to save Lumiere, and actively protects her comrades. She's one of the only 2 characters that can heal the other party members without needing items or gradient abilities, the other character being Lune, which I believe is the devs displaying their kinder natures through gameplay mechanics. What's more, all of this has left Sciel fascinatingly honest. She doesn't really keep secrets or even see the point in pretending to be what she isn't, which is why she's the one to strike down visages. Someone who feels no need for a mask cannot be manipulated by a creature whose essence is lies and deception.
This mask can't hurt me. Because it is me.
Sciel is such a tragic character because the only thing that ever brings her hope in her own future, and not the future of other people, is the promise that Maele will be able to bring Pierre back. And if you choose Maele's ending, she does get her wish. This is honestly one of the reasons I chose Maele's ending in the first place, because after everything she's been through and everything she fought for, I wanted to believe she deserved to be given a reprieve after her life was shattered by the loss of her husband. This is obviously wishful thinking on my part though, I'm not going to pretend this is realistic in any way. It can be hard to accept, but sometimes you simply cannot help someone who's been broken by grief. All you can do is try to be there for them and wait for them to find the will to live on their own. Remember the Flowers is an incredibly good story about loss, new beginnings, trust and memory, and it centers on Cyrus, a young man who wakes up in an alleyway with his body in shambles, his memory in conflict with his apparent reality, and lost with only an incredibly abrasive mercenary to rely on. And yes, it is a furry game. I'm going to need you to get over that for now, I certainly had to. To make a long story short and avoid spoiling what isn't necessary for the topic of this video, Cyrus travels across this world he does not recognize while getting flashes of his life and world before this, of time spent with his boyfriend and his best friend, of studying to be a doctor and the love he felt for his family. But all of it is just gone. The world he inhabits now is, in fact, 300 years later than when his memories end. And everyone he knows and loves is gone. Their lives lost to an apocalyptic event known as the Fall, where 7 meteorites wiped out 60% of the population. Cyrus never got to say goodbye, and Sciel, for all her pain, at least had people she could talk to about her husband. She still had items to remember him by and could ask his students stories about him. Cyrus has been so removed from the deaths of his loved ones that there isn't even anyone else that remembers they were alive in the first place. All signs they ever existed have been lost to time. All it seems he can really do is rely on strangers to help him find a place in a world he was never truly meant to exist in, as he tries to find meaning in a life without the people who made up his entire world. Sometimes people are just taken from us, and we're never given the chance to do something about it, and all we can do is just try to go on. Despite what I said about the Gamage being gentle, it is still cruel. It is a cruelty to tear people apart like this, to slaughter so many innocents. But there is a comfort in its predictability. On the continent, death can come at any time, violently and without warning. Just as in reality, we can never truly know when a life will be lost. And from the moment the expedition reaches the beach, we are constantly reminded of that fact. And that is, I think, why this moment felt not just shocking, but actively hurtful.
Like I always say, it's not about the rock. It's more about the...
Gustave.
Run.
Gustave's death feels like a violation. After surviving the bloodbath on the beach and reuniting with Maele and Lune and Sciel, and with so much left for him to do, Renoir kills him right in front of us, right in front of Maele. And he does it with such a casual air, as if merely brushing lint from his suit. And Gustave fights, not to save himself, but to protect Maele. Wordlessly, without care, Renoir ends his life, and he leaves the others to pick up the pieces.
We could never tell if you were my brother or my father. But to me, you were both. The best brother and father I've ever had.
When one falls, we continue.
Thanks for being my family.
Of all the members of Expedition 33, Maele feels as though she doesn't really belong at the start of the story, and in multiple ways she kind of doesn't. And it's not just that she's far younger than the other expeditioners at half the age of most members, nor even really that she truly originates from outside the painting. No, Maele stands apart at the outset because she seemingly has nobody to grieve over. Disconnected from the people of her town, with no memories of her parents, there are only 2 people Maele truly cares for at the beginning, and one of them now lies dead. Despite Act 2 being titled after him, Verso is not the true heir to the status as main protagonist. that role falls to Maele. She's the one who grows the most, who's driven to improve and take her revenge, and it's ultimately her family the story is about. And in a very real way, Maele acts as Gustave's successor. She inherits his will, she maintains his habits and diary, she creates a technique in homage to him, and she also takes up his mode of grieving. Getting revenge on Renoir is Maele's primary motivation for the majority of Act 2. Her anger at the man who stole her brother from her, driving her to gain strength, to fight the Axons, to reclaim a portion of her power as a painter, and she's ultimately successful in claiming what she wanted. Though even killing Renoir and taking down the paintress cannot mend her pain. It cannot make it all seem worth it to be in Lumiere without Gustave by her side. I think Gustave's burial scene is actually incredibly important, because not only does it give the characters a form of closure, but it also serves to characterize them so very well. Lune can only manage to promise results and repeat the mantra of the expedition to keep herself going. Sciel briefly remembers their friendship before she romanticizes the end and talks about seeing him again. But Maele breaks down, apologizing and saying how much he meant to her and swearing she'll avenge him. It really does feel like the first time she's lost someone she truly loved, and now she doesn't know how to say goodbye. Like she can't find all the words she needs to express just how much she loved him and how much she'll miss him. It's the hardest goodbye she's ever had to say. How do you say goodbye to someone you truly loved? Will words ever be enough to express what they meant to you? How can one word contain so much meaning? How can you ever properly say goodbye? Spiritfarer is a game almost entirely about saying goodbye. You play as Stella, the newly appointed boatsman of the River Styx, as she guides the souls of the recently departed to the afterlife. Your job is to help them overcome their unfinished business and regrets, providing them with a home, cooking them meals, and overall making them comfortable in their final days before they inevitably make their peace with their fate and decide they're ready to move on. What makes this game so powerful is that you center your life on having them there. You'll build a routine around caring for them, on going places with them, talking to them, learning how the world works and how to run your ferry with their help. They become an important fixture of your day-to-day life, a comforting presence you can't imagine going without. And then they decide it's time to go, and you have to take them, to row them to the Everdor where they tell you goodbye for the final time, trying to put into words in these last moments what they never could with a full lifetime beforehand. I'm never ready to say goodbye when they decide it's time to go. I'm always left wishing that they could stay a little longer, that I wouldn't have to be left behind without them. That's how it always feels somehow, that even though it's my job to take them to their end, I'm the one being abandoned at the door. There's a tangible weight to these farewells. Even after they're gone, their homes remain empty and lonely, an eternal reminder that they were in your life once. And you keep remembering them as you go, recalling the lessons they taught and the bonds you shared, each activity recalling another moment spent together you didn't realize would be so precious in the end. And these memories are all you have left now with the departure. We are, all of us, made up of the people we've encountered. Our lives are built from the fragments of time we've shared with another person, and we never realize just how much of us is built upon these foundations until someone is gone. Some people are taken by illness, some people are taken by age, or by the failing of their own mind or body, some people are taken by violence, some people choose to leave, and some people simply vanish from our lives without warning, and the absence is the only thing we have for a time. There are as many ways to lose someone as there are to love them, and the world spins on, no matter how much we feel it should stop. The cruelest twist of the game is that it is not, in fact, the story of expeditioners from Lumiere fighting to save their home and their people from annihilation, but instead the story of the Dessandre family, and how their grief over the death of their son Berceau broke both them and the painted world our heroes inhabit. Maele is in fact Alicia Dessandre, who was tricked by a group known as the Writers and subsequently saved by her brother at the cost of his life, scarring her face and shattering their family in the process. Aline retreated fully both into denial and the canvas, painting herself a new family, a new city, a new reality where her son not only didn't die, but never could. The Verso we know was born immortal, hewn from the memories of a grieving woman to facilitate her escape from the pain of losing him, and her art would sadly reflect her own pain. The painted Renoir was instilled with her grief as well, infused with the fear of losing his son. Even her new Alicia was transformed by her grief, born without a voice and with a face marred by the fire that took the original Verso from them, a cruel reminder of her original's unforgivable sin. Aline would stay in this world, she decided, dedicating the remainder of her life to grieving for her son with his replacement. Remaining in the painting is a death sentence, and one she would happily accept. Her husband, Renoir, could not and would not stand by as his wife withered and died in a cage of escapism, and so entered the canvas to bring her back, forcibly if need be. The resulting battle tore the world apart, cracking the very foundations of its reality in a struggle between two impossible gods. To keep her husband from erasing everything she created, Aline tore Lumiere from the continent and hurled it out to sea. This was the fracture, a cataclysm created by a grieving couple. The people of Lumiere, the Gestrals, every creature in the painting became collateral damage to the clash between them. Renoir, who was no match for Aline on his own, gained assistance from his eldest daughter, Clair, who created the Nevrons, the monsters that inhabit the continent and slaughter the expeditioners Lumiere sends, sealing their chroma in their petrified bodies to weaken Aline enough to give him the upper hand and allow him to erase the painting once and for all. This is the true source of the gamage. The number is a warning from Aline, each tick down a sorrowful reminder that she's losing strength and cannot protect the people of Lumiere from Renoir's erasure. In our victory against the Paintress, all we really do is allow Renoir to finally fulfill his goal and gamage the entirety of Lumiere in one swoop, erasing everyone we sought to protect. Everyone, that is, except Maele and Verso. Maele, who believes she's found her true home in the painting and will do anything to keep it and her friends safe. And Verso, the man who simply wants an end to his pain and guilt. The true tragedy of the Dessandre family isn't that Verso died, it's that they were not strong enough to overcome their grief. In the blaze of red, a life was lost and they could not see beyond it. Casting Aline out of the painting would end the threat of the Paintress, but it would ultimately leave room for the true antagonist of the story to step forward to undo everything they worked for, which forces Maele to step up and take on her own father for the sake of her found family, just as he does for his. And while you do win, it comes at a horrible cost, as Verso decides to fight Maele himself to ensure the painting is erased, and you're forced to choose who to side with. Do you side with Verso and erase the painting to ensure both an end to his own suffering and that Aline and Maele will live their lives in the real world? Or do you side with Maele, ensure that the people of Lumiere will return, that the lives lost will be regained, but at the cost of her own life? As strongly as I'm sure people feel about the ending they chose, there really isn't a single right answer, no true good ending to the story, and I cannot blame anyone who chose either option. I personally sided with Maele, for a multitude of reasons, but mostly because I could not betray the characters I'd come to know and love. For Lune and Sciel and Gustave and Monoko, I could not allow the painting to be erased. And so in my playthrough, Maele stays in the painting, ultimately choosing a happy, if much shorter, life. I'd actually really love to hear which ending you chose and your reasoning for it. Let me know in the comments, I'm genuinely curious as to people's thoughts on this. You may think it's incredibly unfair that the story, despite all our hard work and all the hope we built up, ultimately comes down to a choice between two terrible options. And you know what? That's entirely fair. I'd imagine Maele feels the exact same way. There should have been another option. There should have been a compromise, a third path, literally anything more than this. But that's the thing, there really couldn't have been, and that's because Clair Obscur is a tragic story. And I mean that in the genre sense. Clair Obscur is literally a tragedy. What makes a tragedy, more than anything else, is the knowledge that it should have gone a different way, that things should have been better. But because of the inherent nature of the characters involved, it literally could not have happened any other way. Perhaps there is a world where Maele actually does stay in the painting just a little longer, where she leaves and returns from time to time to see her second family, where she finds her love for life reignited and chooses to live. But that's not the world we find ourselves in. Because Aline is so obsessed with hiding from her pain, because Clair cannot be bothered to help, because Renoir is too controlling and refuses to trust his daughter, Maele refuses to ever leave the painting to protect the one she loves.
You lied to your father.
No.
He saw it too. But he wanted to believe. You're going to die here. Why don't you just leave? You can always come back.
The moment I leave, Papa will erase this canvas.
This is not worth your life.
What life? My life of loneliness in a shell of a body, with no voice and no future.
You're Maele. No matter where you are, you don't need this canvas.
But everything I want is here. Here I have a chance to live, verso to live. Out there I merely exist.
Life keeps forcing cruel choices.
Stop quoting Papa!
You know, there's a moment in God of War Ragnarok that I keep thinking back to while writing the script, and it's genuinely one of my favourite moments in gaming. It's the scene where Kratos and Freya visit the Norns to seek a way to subvert destiny, and what the three have to say honestly summarises why this story ends the way it does.
There is no destiny, Puck.
The protagonists are speechless. They do not understand.
There is no grand design, no script. Only the choices you make. That your choices are so predictable merely make us seem prescient.
When my son was born, shut up! Your prophecy said he would die a needless death.
And he did. Because you could not let him go. Because he thirsted for revenge. And because you kill gods.
But what Kratos did, it was not out of hate.
Should I bring him a crown then? He still slays gods, but now he's sad about it? You are the sum of your choices, nothing more. And because your choices never change, you will learn that Heimdall intends to kill your son in Asgard, and you will do what you do best.
Kratos does make a different choice in the end, and in doing so avoids his fated death, but nobody in the Dessandre family, least of all Renoir, is capable of doing the same. Because of their inherent nature, because of the choices they make, this is how the story had to go. I know a lot of people don't like it when you call Renoir a villain, and that's entirely fair. The game doesn't actually have a villain, unless you count the corrosive nature of grief and trauma. But there are two important things to consider when it comes to discussing him. Due to his nature, Renoir is the ultimate antagonist of the story, which is not the same as being the villain. But he willingly steps into the role of villain himself. Both Renoirs do actually, for the sake of their families.
If saving you means losing you, then so be it. Your friends speak truth, and it changes nothing. You can hate me, but that's a choice I must make.
And some people do argue that the fact that he does all this for his family, and that he doesn't erase the denizens of the canvas out of malice, excuses his actions. But, to paraphrase Earther, should I give him a medal then? He still wipes out thousands of innocent lives, but his motivations are sympathetic? No. Good intentions and motivations do not excuse harmful actions, they merely explain them. I also think people tend to get too caught up in the weeds over whether or not the citizens of Lumiere count as real or not when it comes to discussing this. Because setting aside the fact that the citizens of Lumiere are not only sentient, they are also sapient, and not only do both the humans and Gestrals demonstrate the ability to grow past what they were originally created for, to grieve for their own losses and create their own art, but Renoir himself treats them as if they are real. When Renoir apologizes to Verso for the pain his family caused, or acknowledges the grief Sciel feels, he is directly acknowledging their humanity. He is treating them as if their pain and emotions are just as real and worthy of consideration as his own.
I regret that it caused you so much pain. What Aline did was unfair to you most of all. Please, accept the Dessandre family's apologies. I know it seems absurd to offer oblivion as recompense, but perhaps that's the outcome we both desire.
Grief often blinds us, and we make choices we can never take back.
You grieve for two.
I grieve for many.
See, here's the thing, I don't think whether the expedition members are painted or not matters to Renoir. I legitimately believe he would be doing the exact same thing if they were quote-unquote real people. Because what matters to him isn't whether they were born or painted, it's that they're not his family. His only priority is piecing his family back together, and the painting stands in the way of that, so it has to go. And because he cannot let go of control for even an instant, because he will not extend any level of trust to Maele or even attempt to see things from her perspective, he will ultimately lose her. You are the sum of your choices, nothing more. And because Aline made her choices, and because he made his choices, and Clair and Maele made their own, this is how it ultimately ends. And this is not me villainizing Lenoir at all. I actually don't think he's any more responsible than anyone else. It is just important to acknowledge how his choices play a part in how the story ends. There's actually a character in South of Midnight that acts as a parallel to Aline, and that would be Hazel's grandmother, Bonnie Flood. Yes, the name is really stupid. A lot of the characters have dumb names in this game, just go with it. Bonnie is the ultimate villain of South of Midnight, and her motivation comes from the same place as Aline's. Bonnie once had 2 children, Hazel's father, whose name I can't remember so I'll just call him Jim, and her daughter Cherie, who she favoured to the point that she would punish Jim for the smallest things related to his sister, like when her dress got dirty. One day, Cherie's dress was dirtied again, and Jim, fearing his mother's wrath, tried to wash Cherie off in the river, and didn't realise how slippery she would be, and the poor child drowned, something Bonnie would never forgive him for. Bonnie's grief over the death of her daughter would absolutely consume her, and refusing to accept the loss of her baby girl, would go on to commit horrible crimes for the purpose of eventually bringing her daughter back to life, some of which included dark magic, attempting to murder Hazel for getting in her way, and sealing Cherie's soul in a tree so it can't move on. And is any of this sounding remotely familiar to you? Bonnie spends decades hurting people and accumulating dark power for the sake of bringing her dead daughter back to life. And in all that time, she refused to accept Cherie's loss or address her own grief or even forgive her own son for the accident. And when you confront her at the end of the game, this is what she has to say.
Is that Molly's heart?
Why didn't it work? It should have brought Cherie back.
You can't bring back the dead.
You did something, didn't you? That's why the magic failed.
I heard your baby spirit crying. In a tree. She was in pain. I did everything I could to help her.
In pain? Or just in your way? You have no idea what loss feels like. When Cherie drowned, I was so raw it hurt to breathe. I'd see cars with those baby on board signs and just want to ram them. This town's full of people who don't deserve their kids, who beat them right in the middle of a store. Why are their children still alive and not my Cherie?
Bonnie isn't wrong, by the way. The abuse of children is a central theme in the game, and parents who treat their children that way do not deserve to have them. But the entitlement, the rage, the excuses she makes? This game has literal inhuman creatures in it, but Bonnie is the only real monster you'll find. She fell into her grief and let it twist her into something horrible, and all of it was for nothing. But there is one last option.
There is a way you can see Cherie again.
I don't believe in heaven. If you came here to kill me.
No. But there is a town for folks who can't move on. Or won't. You can't do any more harm there. But think it through, Bunny. I've seen what happens to folks who can't let go of the past. Your choice.
Cherie's baby brush. She was so tender-headed, I'd get cross with her. Now I'd give anything to brush her hair again.
And you can, my darling.
I know who you are. It won't really be her.
You'll never be able to tell the difference, I promise.
I won't.
Not if you don't want to.
You're very kind.
Rue is a magician that traps people in a never-ending illusion so that a malevolent spirit known as Kushma can feed on their emotions. And Bonnie knows this. She knows none of it will be real, knows that she'll essentially be made into a spiritual feed bag, and she agrees to it anyway. She would rather hide away in a sweet lie than live with her grief and regret. Bonnie exists as a parallel to Aline, willfully hiding away from the truth and ultimately hurting the people she should care about, rather than confront the painful reality of her child's death and process her grief and loss like a responsible person would. And this finally brings us to Verso, the most sympathetic liar in modern gaming. Verso is one of the more interesting characters in the discussion of grief because his is so wholly unique. The Dessandre family's loss broke the world of the canvas, and their grief seems to infuse nearly every living being within. Even the Gestrels, which are inherently silly in their battle-mad understanding of the world, are capable of grieving, as proven by Minoko when Noko is killed. The Gestrels may be capable of rebirth and never truly dying, but that rebirth doesn't come without a cost. As shown with Noko, they permanently lose portions of their memories, literally losing a part of what makes them who they are. Noko Reborn is inherently a different, changed person from the Noko Monoko knew. The Noko he knew is lost forever, and that is what he mourns. But Verso stands apart from every other character because his grief does not stem from a death, but rather from his own existence. Verso is a copy of a dead man, created to assuage the anguish of a woman so averse to facing reality that she would rather abandon her family and kill herself in escapism than face the world without her son. And Verso is aware of this. He is fully aware that his very existence is the reason his mother is dying, and that it is the reason she will continue trying to kill herself. And this knowledge is so awful, so painfully guilting, that it destroys him. There's a lot that can be said about Verso and the Dessandre family, and I think I'll cover it in another video because this one is already far too long. But the long and short of it is that the reason for Verso's death drive, the reason he wants to erase the canvas, is the knowledge of what his existence does to his mother. People may disagree with me on this, but I don't think Verso truly wants to die. I don't think what he actually desires is oblivion. What Verso wants, more than anything, is for the pain and guilt to stop, and erasure is the only way he can initially think to ensure that it does. I think Verso's interactions with Aline leading to the painter's fight do a good job of showcasing this. The guilt on his face, the despair in his voice when he tells her she has to go home, knowing that she can neither truly recognize him or her own situation anymore, and then later how lost he seems when Renoir does offer him oblivion. Verso just wants the pain to end, and he wants to stop hurting the people he cares about just by existing. I believe that, despite everything, Verso gains some level of hope from Maele. Hope that there really is a way to make sure everyone comes out of this okay. Hope that he can finally find some measure of peace in living once all of this is over. But as I've said, this is a tragedy. Due to who these people are, it will not and cannot have a happy ending. And the moment that truly solidifies this is when Maele lies to Renoir about staying in the painting. You can see it on his face the moment he realizes that she's lying, the moment he believes his very existence will be the cause of another loved one's death. And so Verso fights, and in my playthrough, he loses. He loses and begs Maele to unpaint him so his suffering can end, because in this tragedy there can be no other existence for him. His life cannot be anything but pain. And this story ends with Maele choosing to stay because she doesn't want to live the life that she has outside because of her own guilt and pain, choosing instead to allow herself to die in the canvas, the painting acting as a cross between euthanasia and palliative care. I stand by my choice, but I truly don't believe there was a single right answer to this. As I said, there could and should have been a third solution, but that's where the tragedy lies. One way or another, this story ends as it started, with the loss of someone loved and the grief of that loss left for those that remain. You know, working on this script, there's another scene my thoughts keep coming back to, and it's the moment in Kingdom Hearts 3 where you beat Xemnas for the final time. And if you're not familiar, it goes like this.
I know that you have a heart. What do you feel? Was it worth it?
I feel the emptiness where my companions once stood. I took them for granted. And now I have nothing. My first surge of emotion in years. For as long as I can remember, and its loneliness. Do you see? A heart is just pain.
Pain is being human, Xemnas.
Really? It must take incredible strength.
He's right. It takes so much strength to be human. It takes so much strength to bear the weight of being alive, to keep going through grief and pain and loss and sorrow and hardship and turmoil. It takes so much strength that I can honestly feel like there's just too much to push through sometimes. Sometimes we don't have that strength. Sometimes we break, sometimes we fall, and life can truly feel like it's just one long tragedy, doomed to end in nothing but pain. But it's not. Clair Obscur may end in tragedy, but not all stories do. And there's so much more to life than just what we lose. And there's always, always hope. The world of the canvas may have been fractured by the Dessandre's grief, but it's still full of wonder and kindness. Extraordinary beings like Sciel and the Gestrals just waiting to be found. And while Maele may have chosen a shorter life, she's ultimately chosen a happy one, surrounded by the people who love her, people who now have a future they didn't before. And maybe Laurent lost his parents and his grief and anger isolated him for years. That doesn't mean he has to remain alone. There are still people who care. People who will reach out a hand in support and love to give him the help he needs, so he need not fear himself anymore. And while Chris's family may fall apart, Chris isn't alone anymore. They have new friends in Susie and Rolsay, and they reconnect with Noel and Bardley. There's still love to be found, still people who care. In Cyrus, we'll never see his old friends or family again, but they never forget him. In an unparalleled act of kindness, his new friends risk a dangerous journey to bring him to his old hometown, where he finds that his loved ones buried a time capsule filled with proof of their love, with letters and gifts and even pictures. Proof again that they were here and that even now, they just want him to be happy. And while the world will not stop for us to grieve and we bear the weight of each life that passes from our own, and all love may eventually end in goodbyes, that doesn't mean that love was never worth it to begin with. We will always carry those we loved, those who made us who we are, within us wherever we go. What they taught us, what they built for us, none of it is ever a waste. The world is still beautiful and full of wonder, and when you gaze up at the sky that they once stood by your side and looked upon too, they remain with you, and your smile will forever be the echo of the one they made you smile all those times. Grief may be painful and it may seem like too much, but is that not proof that you truly loved? And that you can find love again, new and resplendent and beautiful in all its own ways, in a world filled to the brim with every experience you can imagine, waiting to be lived by you and everyone you connect to. The truth of love is that knowing it will always mean knowing loss as well. But you will know love again, just as you will know joy and sorrow and contentment and anger. You will live a life full of all these things, and though there will be pain to endure and loss to process, both it and you will be beautiful all the same. It will be worth it in the end. Just remember.
Tomorrow comes.
Oh my god, it's finally done. Thank you so much for watching. This is a topic I've wanted to talk about for a really long time. I just didn't have the proper framework for it until this amazing fucking game came along and was just fucking perfect for it. I'm really glad I found the perfect game for my anniversary video. Also, can you believe this channel is 2 fucking years old now? It really doesn't feel like it's been that long, and I honestly wasn't sure it lasts on YouTube, but I guess I'm here to stay. I really love making videos, and I'm so grateful to have an audience of people willing to support me and my work. Speaking of support, if you like this video, please consider pledging your support on Patreon, where, starting as low as $1 a month, you gain rewards like access to my private Discord, the ability to see larger videos like this early, your name in the end credits, and even the ability to vote on upcoming videos and projects. It'd be a lot harder to find the time and energy to do this without the support of my lovely Patreon members like Wisteria, Tetraphobe49, Owen Oops, and Lustrous Lizard. Working on this video was so satisfying but so draining. Holy shit, I don't think I've cried this much covering any topic before, especially with all the games I played to prepare. Each game I've mentioned in this video is well worth your time if you haven't tried them, and I'm pretty sure all of them are going to end up in my best games of the year video. Anyway, I seriously need a break, so the next thing I make is going to be on a way sillier topic, so look forward to that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye. Clair Obscur. 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 Renoir. It's painted by Renoir. Oh god, I do not have the right mic for singing, or the right voice for it. Is it like a guide somewhere? No, of course not. Of course that's not being helpful. Sandfall, I love you, but why does nobody say his name the same way twice?